All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today's episode number 120, which is always, as the episode numbers go up, I'm always incredibly grateful and excited. Our guest today is Carl Davidson, who is the co-founder of a company called Candle, which is an AI-powered email software, basically. It sounds almost so simple. And, you might be asking yourself, well, why are we talking about email on an immigration tech, podcast and show? But the reality is email is, when you really think about it, one of the most kind of important aspects of any kind of immigration practice, or really any business. The amount of questions we answer, the amount of information we share, the connections that we make, a lot of it happens via email. And I'm super excited about this conversation because I use email too, obviously. And I'm really excited to hear how Candle uses AI to help make email easier and more efficient, and make work easier and faster. So before we get to that, I would like to say thank you to our main sponsor for this episode, which is DocketWise. So for you all in the immigration space, again, you've probably heard of DocketWise before, but in case you haven't, DocketWise is an all-in-one case management system and platform. They focus on immigration forms, customizable questionnaires. They have a ton of integrations with a lot of different software products within the immigration space and more broadly within legal technology. They integrate with my company, Laborless, which is awesome. They have excellent customer service. They have a lot of great content. One of the things I love about DocketWise is they have a podcast, they have ebooks, they have a great blog. There's so much that they do for the industry in terms of providing content, and they support events like this show. So I'm grateful to DocketWise for being a great patron and supporter of the show. If you're interested in checking them out, maybe you're in the market for a new case management system, or maybe you just want to know what features they have, right? And you're already happy with whatever you're using. Check them out. There's a link in the show notes, or go to www.docketwise.com. Okay, cool. So, I'm Roman Zelchenko. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm your host. I'm a former immigration lawyer turned entrepreneur, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Laborless, which is an immigration tech platform that automates H-1B visa compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which is which brings you the show, and it's a digital marketing agency for the immigration and mobility industry. So, Carl, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. I got so pumped up talking about what Candle does. I forgot to introduce myself. So thank you for being here. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited too, Rowan. Super excited.
Okay. I want to start in the beginning, as we do with all of our guests, and kind of learn a little bit about your life, your career, right? Your kind of how you got into law, because you were like me. We have very similar backgrounds. We're both immigration lawyers. We practiced for a bit, and then we pivoted into the technology space, and now we're both founders. So it's really cool to see somebody who had such a similar kind of journey. So let's go back even before law school. So you grew up, we were chatting, and you grew up in the Midwest, right? You went to college and law school in the Midwest. What was it like growing up there? I grew up on the East Coast, right? And I don't like to say flyover states because I've been to Chicago plenty of times, in Ohio, and I love the Midwest. I love a lot of things about the culture and the pace, compared to the craziness of New York City. What was it like for you, kind of growing up there, and what were your influences?
Yeah, so it was amazing. So I live in California these days, but I always consider myself as a Midwesterner. I still consider myself as a Midwestern kid. Love the seasons. That's one thing that I miss out here in California. And just I had a great childhood. I actually. My mom is an immigrant, and I grew up with her. I grew up with my mom's family, so that was kind of an interesting dynamic. My mom's from the Philippines, and so growing up in the Midwest, we were introduced to a lot of the Filipino community, right, in Ohio, which is not huge, right, but just having that kind of sense of community outside the family in the Midwest was pretty special, right. And I think apart from that too, just the whole, the sports, the football, it's something that I don't kind of feel out here in California too much. It's really kind of intricate and in the DNA of folks in the Midwest, I think. Right. So.
Did you feel so? Your Filipino side. Did that affect your, I don't know, your view of the world, like the friends that you made in school or anything? I mean, does your mom have an accent, for example, like in
An accent?
English? Yeah.
Yeah. She kind of has an accent. Yeah.
Like little, because like for example, I grew up. Both my parents have, and
Mhm.
actually, I was talking to somebody the other day in English, and I grew up here. We moved here when I was 2 years old, and someone was like, "Oh, I could tell you're from like Eastern Europe because of your accent." And
Right.
it's not that I wasn't offended. I was like interested because I didn't think I
Hmm.
have one. But
Hmm.
then these little tiny things, like what you grew up with, what you hear, the lunch you bring to
Yeah.
school, right? Instead of
Right.
Lunchables, you bring like
No.
leftovers that maybe some kids are like, "What is that?" So I'm just
Yeah.
curious, did you have any of those little aspects to your to your life?
Absolutely. So it was all like rice and fish,
Nice.
I like rice and Filipino food. So I would bring some of these to school and it was different. Everybody else was bringing like pizza and French
Yeah.
fries and a hamburger. And here I am walking in with like adobo with rice or pancit, and like the noodles and everything like that.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what is that? What's that smell? Kind of thing. but, uh, but yes, definitely. I just, that's the food I grew up with and the culture I grew up with at the time. So I definitely have those similar characteristics that
I
you're
love that.
talking about.
Did you, as a separate kind of thought or note, I like to ask a lot of the guests, when you were growing up, did you consider yourself more of like a studious kid, or were you more sort of like into, I mean, I don't want to say entrepreneurial because when you're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, but
Mhm.
maybe you sold baseball cards or like, some people hustle bubble gum or, do
Mhm.
lemonade stands. I mean, did you have either of those things, or were you kind of like, all right, I'm going to go to school and, focus on that, and you don't really think about what does it mean to start a business as a kid?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, in my opinion, Roman, I think immigrant community, they have a natural entrepreneurial kind of streak in them. They took the risk to come to the U.S. And I
Yeah.
think with that risk comes that sense of entrepreneurship, right? I'm going to make it here. I'm going to make it in the U.S. And I think my mom and her family really instilled that to me. Like, hey, you could do anything here, right? Like we came here, you could do anything here. It's up to you, right? Um, Having said that, though, too, they really, especially my mom, she really ironed into like you got to study.
Mm-hmm.
She's in medicine. Like a lot of Filipinos that come to the U.S., they're in healthcare, as you probably know, right?
Yep.
So it's like, hey, you got to go to med school, period, right? You're going to school, you got to, you're studying biology, organic chemistry, and you're going to med school, and that's it, right? And so they kind of also instilled, yes, they gave me an entrepreneurial spirit, but also they instilled that, hey, you got to get the grades, or else, like it's gonna be some problems.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot. I mean, on the one hand, immigrants come here and they took such a risk. Their built-in risk tolerance is quite high, and
Hmm.
so starting a business and is sort of less of the pressure is not really there as strongly because they're okay losing it all and starting again and kind of going through those things. On the other hand, a lot of I mean, maybe it just depends on the person or the family. They have gone through so much risk to get here, that they, with the kids, they flip and they say, I want you to do the least risky thing possible.
Mm.
Doctor, lawyer, engineer, nurse,
Yep.
accountant, whatever, right? Like there will always be a job. You can always benefit from that education. Don't start a business. Don't do anything like crazy like we did. We want you to
Mhm.
feel safe and secure. So it is interesting to see kind of, sometimes it's personal. Sometimes people
Mhm.
lean into that risk, and other times
Mhm.
people say, look, we've done so much already. I want you to not do this at all. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's cool. And also culturally, it's interesting. Like you said, I mean, the Philippines has so many incredible nursing programs specifically. I mean, all sorts of medical programs, but I mean, we in the U.S., if you've been to a hospital and didn't run into a nurse from the Philippines, you
Yeah.
haven't been to the hospital, right? So I think that's really cool. So did you? I mean, you're obviously a lawyer now. So how did you take that? Did you say like, yes, that's what I'm going to do, or were you kind of like, look, I hear that I need to study, but I'm not really interested in medicine, biology. I'll do my own thing.
No, I went into college as a pre-med person, right?
Mm.
It was kind of instilled in my head growing up, like, doctor. And and then I started taking biology and organic chemistry. They were okay. I think what really did it for me was I kind of had still have kind of a fear of blood, taking people's blood, And I remember when my mom was doing her residency and she would go in the hospital, she would bring me sometimes, and just kind of seeing the things in the hospital as a kid, it's kind of like, oh, in terms of like taking the blood and things like that. So I knew that there was always going to be kind of a challenge to get over that. And that's when I started to explore other things in college. Like, hey, let's take this history class. Let's take this political science course. Oh, this is interesting. And that's kind of geared me towards more of a non-medical route, right? But I definitely started off on a different path in college. And even for several years after I was a lawyer practicing, Roman, like every Thanksgiving, my family would be like, hey, are you gonna do maybe a post-baccalaureate pre-med program? Like, man, I've been out of college for 10 years. What's going on here? I said, no, there's still room. You're still young. Like,
that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, listen, when it's culturally set that medicine is the right way to do it,
right.
That's funny. So you finished undergrad, you went to law school, you studied law, and I know you, like me, you did practice immigration law when you graduated. Did you know that you wanted to get into immigration? Did you kind of fall into it by accident? Like because immigration is not something that a lot of people go into law school thinking about. So yeah, how did you come across that?
Yeah, no, I was doing some work and interning with corporate law firms, like employment defense law firms, employment defense and workers' compensation. So completely different, right? I always had people, especially maybe like connections with my family, asking me about immigration questions, and I felt that I needed to try to answer them. It was like, hey, you're a lawyer, can you help? And I didn't feel like I needed that experience, so I sought immigration work. Just because I was getting so much interest from family members and relatives and friends of friends in the Filipino community, that it became like, maybe this is something that I could actually pursue as a career. And that's when I started thinking more seriously about going into doing immigration full time. And I started out. And the main thing was employment immigration at the time. So
were those the questions you were getting from family? Like, what visa can I use to work here, or things like that?
Yeah. Some of them were kind of related again to like health and nursing and things like that, right? So yeah, it kind of dovetailed into that. There were some questions around removal and deportation and things. But I think my interest was mostly around employment based, and that's what I pursued.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I got into immigration by accident. I got an internship at Fragment my 1L summer, and I wanted to do corporate law. I grew up in New York, like Wall Street is just everywhere you look. Wall Street is just part of the culture here.
Yep.
Studied economics undergrad and worked at investment banks. That's what I wanted to do. And then I saw Fragment and I'm like, okay, corporate immigration. I don't know what the immigration thing, and mind you, my family immigrated to the US. We just never talked about it really. I was like, what is this thing? But yeah, it's corporate. It's close enough to what I want to do. Of course. Yeah. It's great. I'll take the opportunity. And then really just fell in love with it. I mean, to your point, I wasn't getting a ton of questions, interestingly enough, but once people knew that I had some experience in immigration, that's when the floodgates opened. So I know you also started Fragment, you worked there for some time, and then you went to another firm and practiced.
In LA.
I think in LA. Okay. So, when you left, the practice, what was your thought process? Because I know you worked at a couple of firms, you did it for a couple of years, right? I mean, which is, from my perspective, it's what I did too. It was enough to understand what the work is like. So just curious, what was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said, okay, I'm going to go into immigration? What was your thought process when you said I'm going to go into the technology or product side and leave like the direct practice of law?
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know exactly why or how I moved off of practicing law. I kind of always had an interest in tech.
Mm-hmm.
I saw an opportunity. One day I saw an opportunity at a company called INSZoom. I was like, I know INSZoom. Our firm uses a competitor of INSZoom at the time, right? And this is interesting. What are they doing? And I just put in a resume. Next thing I know, I'm talking with CEO Mesh, and that kind of just opened up my eyes as to this. Like, hey, I could actually do other things with my law degree. This is crazy. I thought I could only be doing drafting paperwork with my law degree. This opens up an entire new thing. A little bit of customer success, a lot of product management. So I remember hearing the term product manager for the first time as like a title, and at first I was like, "What is that?" I thought it was a fake title. Like, what is that? What can I do with that? Is that marketable? Because this was back in 2014 or something. Like, what is that? What is that title? And yeah, they were like, yeah, this is a real thing, And I started at INSZoom. I started kind of talking to the engineers and giving some ideas about what can be built as features, because I was essentially their user as an immigration attorney.
Right.
And some of those things were built and went out, and I heard my friends who were immigration attorneys were using a couple of features that I helped suggest. And at that point I felt like a movie star, Robin. It's like, wow, this is something I helped create, and it's out there. And at that point I couldn't return to practicing law. It just opened up an entire thing. Like, wow, this is like a lot funner. I can be creative here and build things. This is nuts. This is crazy.
And having that background as an immigration lawyer allows you to truly understand what your customers are talking about. And it's not to say that there are wonderful people who work in this industry, obviously, and build amazing products and never practiced. That's totally fine. You can learn it, but it does give you a little bit of a different perspective. And sometimes, frankly, from even a sales perspective, or from a willingness of the attorney to open up to you, frankly, sometimes you have that ability to pull more out of them, because you're like, look, I get it. I was there. I did the same thing you did. And so yeah, I think that's really, really awesome. So you spent a bunch of years there. I know you worked at a couple other tech companies. Let me ask you, so because you left INSZoom at around 2017. You spent let's say 3 years working outside of the immigration tech space.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit in legal, a little bit in other stuff.
Yep.
As you were working at a few of these other companies, were you thinking to yourself, cool, I've pivoted away from immigration, maybe even from law. I'm now a technology person. Yes, I have a legal background, but I'm a tech person. I'm a product person. Is that what you were thinking? Or what was your thought process back then?
So I think I wanted to find out if, the stuff that I was doing at INSZoom was because I was an immigration lawyer, or if I could translate that into other tech, right? Because I wasn't sure, right? Like I went from an immigration lawyer to INSZoom, and I guess maybe I was trying to prove to myself, like, is the success I was having at INSZoom because I was an immigration lawyer, or am I really now like a tech and product person, right? And so that was kind of a major reason why I wanted to seek actual, like non-immigration related tech, right? And which led me to other opportunities, led me to an opportunity at Intuit, right? With Intuit TurboTax. And that's really when I found out, like, hey, yeah, this is, I could do this. It's not just because I was an immigration lawyer that things worked out in INSZoom. I could actually do product. Like, this is cool. Like, this is, and so maybe it was more of a proving point for me. And at that, like at a place like Intuit, they will really teach you tech and product, that's where I kind of learned a lot about, customer, design, customer partnerships and finding the pain point for users, UX and UI, just things like that. And so, yeah, I think it was mostly about just proving to myself that I could actually become a tech and product person.
Is there something that I mean, especially a company like Intuit, huge company, as you said, probably a lot of formal training and
Mhm.
a ton of people with experience. Is there anything that you remember kind of pulling from there that you still, take into account as you're building your current business or just after that when you left Intuit?
Yeah, I think there's several. The main thing is learning about customer empathy when you're
Mhm.
building products. Um, it's really getting in the shoes of a user and understanding what they do and their pain points. That's really what I learned when I learned that in Intuit. I've taken that
Mhm.
throughout all my journey here, and that's really prevalent. Like for instance, I was on their TurboTax team, and if you take a look at people going through TurboTax, they're filing their taxes,
Right.
and that's not a very delightful experience. Filing taxes is a pretty stressful experience. So what Intuit and TurboTax tried to do, and I think have done successfully, is that they turned a very once stressful experience into kind of like more like a delightful experience, or
Mhm.
like a kind of a fun experience
Yeah.
with using UX and their UI and the flow, putting certain questions up front and then leaving certain questions towards the end of the flow. And all that is just talking to users, right?
Mm.
Like, okay, where's the pain point? Where's the point of frustration? How do we fix that? So that's the one thing. And I
I
still
love
use
that.
it now. It's like if whenever I kind of have a brain fog as to, oh my God, what are we going to do? I think for me, it always comes back to the customer, to the user, and get as close to the pain point as possible, and that will give you some insights as to what to build and where to go.
Did it make you more confident to reach out to users and just ask them questions? Because I think it's easy to take for granted when you were INSZoom, for example. I'm assuming, but this is how I
Mhm.
am or was, because I'm an immigration lawyer myself. Especially when we were first starting, I took for granted the fact that I already had built-in empathy. I didn't have to practice sort of asking questions in a way to build empathy with somebody going through a thing that I don't know anything about. And so I mean, I'm just wondering, like, yeah, do you feel like that sort of was a big switch for you where you said, okay, I did this already at INSZoom, but it was all sort of innate because I was an immigration lawyer, as you said. Here
Mhm.
I'm learning it truly as a science, maybe even as an art, if you
Yep.
if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I learned from that experience at Intuit is that maybe maybe some of the decisions I was making at Ina Zoom was a little biased,
Mm.
because in my head, I had my own, I had my own experience as to pain points that I had practicing immigration. But does that necessarily relate to the vast majority of immigration
Mm.
attorneys? Maybe, maybe not, right? But at a big tech company, you kind of learn to get qualitative and quantitative data from customers to get a bigger picture, um, as to which pain point to attack,
Mhm.
right?
I-
That's the main thing, Roman. It's basically I think a lot of people start with the solution to a problem. Um, at Intuit, learn start with a problem and then go for the solution.
that's so wise. And actually the fact that you learned it early on in your career is, it's excellent for your own growth. And obviously if you ever mentor people or have people
Mhm.
working on your team, I love that. That's such
I,
great
I
feedback.
will add, because you mentioned mentors. I think when I was at INSZoom in the Bay Area, I had no idea what a product manager was. Right? Like honestly, this is not something you go to school for, like
Right.
tech and like so. There at the time, I really needed to. I was trying to go to as many meetups as I could in the Bay Area that talked about product and tech,
Mhm.
just to learn about it. So yeah, I think it's very important to have a mentor in this, especially if you're trying to transition from one career to another. Like I think mentors are key, right? And I think I've been lucky to have mentors throughout each of those points in time.
And to add to that, by the way, for anybody who's listening and it might say, oh, well, how do I find a mentor? I don't want to bother them. A mentor doesn't have to be an official title where you meet once a week, and it could be somebody who just answers questions once in a while as you're going through something. And maybe after that, that's it. You don't quote unquote need them anymore. And, sure, you can be in touch, but like you said, it could be people at various steps throughout a transition or throughout your career who are just willing to give you advice. So I also encourage, whenever younger attorneys or especially founders want to talk, I always give them my time, right? Because I want to, and sometimes I just had a call recently with a young sort of immigration tech founder or someone who has some ideas. And I was very honest with her, right, about some of my thoughts and questions. And I'm like, look, you came here looking for somebody to just say, oh, everything you're saying is brilliant. I'm here to tell you, like, here are some hard truths that I've learned along the way about what it's like to build a company and the industry. And, here's what I think you should do. Even though some of it is not, it sounds tough. To me, that's super, hopefully it was valuable for this person, but for me, that kind of information is always valuable. Okay. Before we move on, cause I want to, this is where I want to talk about your return to immigration tech, right? Because that ultimately leads to the transition of, you working for other tech companies to saying, okay, I'm ready to start something of my own. Before we do, I just want to take a quick pause and say thank you to the second sponsor of this episode, which is Journey. So Journey Business Plans. So for folks who work in the business immigration space, if you're doing E2 investor visas, EB2 NIWs, EB5s into the US and other visas, and you need business plans for your immigration cases, Journey is the leading provider of business immigration plans. They do thousands of these per year. And, yes, they do it into the US, but they also have support for folks doing applying for investor visas into Canada, into Australia, New Zealand, Asia, Europe, etc. So if you are an immigration lawyer or provider, or if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking, hey, how do I move to the US, on an E2 visa or an EB5 visa, and what does that look like? Reach out to Journey and they will support you with immigration business plans and have a vast network of immigration lawyers to connect you to. I've known the Journey team for many, many years. They're a great supporter of this show and other things that I've done. So I definitely recommend checking them out. There's a link in the show notes, or you can visit them at joorney.com. So thank you to Journey. Okay, cool. So Carl, you've done this. You've worked. You left INSZoom. You've kind of proven to yourself that you can be a great product manager. You can learn about other industries, and then you go back and work. You go back to immigration tech, and I really want to hear about how this happened. And you go to a company called Legalpad, which a couple of years later was acquired by Deel. And I actually had one of the co-founders, Sarah, on the show of Legalpad, and it was a really excellent story. And Legalpad was a great partner of Laborless back in the day when they were focusing on H-1Bs. So I'd love to hear your how did you get into that? How did you kind of come back, and maybe why did you come back to immigration tech?
Yeah, I saw that opportunity, and I felt to myself that this potential. I mean, it sounds like a perfect fit in terms of my background and the opportunity at Legalpad at the time, which was their director of product position. I think I just had this itch to get back, Roman, and I think at the time, the team at Legalpad, like, the senior leadership team there, it just great people. And during my conversations with them, it was something that, like, I was like, this is a great place. Right. And this is something I looked at Legalpad and I said, like, hey, this is something that actually, like, this would be something I could, like, I would build to on if I had an opportunity. Why not? This is great. Right. When I got on board Legalpad, it's kind of it's the first time that in my career that I got to really sit on the table where decisions were being made for the company, right? Like this, like the CEO level, I was in those weekly meetings, and throughout my previously before that, I was never at that level, right? And getting that experience was really eye opening in terms of like, hey, this is wow, this is great, this is exciting, this is great. Like I could make decisions that actually can have significant changes for this company. It also gave me a sense of startup life, because even though at the time, Legalpad raised some money at the time, it still felt like a very nimble, fast, startup organization and feel, which is great, right? And all this was positive. It was a positive influence to me. It was something that I truly liked, versus, I was coming up with some very large companies, and at those large companies, you may have a lot of tactical decisions that you make, but not very strategic, right? And whereas Legalpad, I was exposed to the opportunity to provide strategic decisions. So it gave me a lot of confidence, I think, to in that from that role. So
that's awesome. I totally understand where you're coming from there, and it's fun. I mean, doing the strategic decision making is just flexing a different muscle, right? I mean, you're still. I feel like almost strategic. You have to go through the experience of making tactical decisions to understand how strategic decisions ultimately impact. They funnel down into tactical decisions, and so it's really cool to have that opportunity to progress. And honestly, a lot of people progress in their careers by going to smaller organizations. I mean, that's just how it is, right? So, yeah, that's really cool. Obviously, you left before they were acquired by Deel, but then you did go to another immigration tech company, slightly bigger one, also who have been on the show, which I'm very excited about. So Envoy Global, right? Envoy Global. Interestingly enough, they're based in Chicago, so back in the Midwest, but I guess you stayed in LA.
Stayed in LA. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that experience like? Now you're kind of going from a really nimble, tiny startup to, I mean, really an organization that's been around, even at that point, 2 decades plus. So, talk a little bit about that. What was going through your mind? What were you kind of getting from one place and then from the other?
So I think I spoke with I had a conversation with the CTO at Envoy, and kind of the opportunity was very unique, and it's essentially kind of building the concept of adopting technology at Envoy Global. As you know, lawyers and legal professionals are not, there's some tech adoption hurdles that you have to go through. Like every tech has to get through this adoption hurdle for legal professionals. And it was it sounded very interesting to me that I could kind of go in and lead this kind of team around improving the tech adoption at Envoy Global for the lawyers, right? And another thing I think that interests me is that tech adoption was always a problem. It was always a challenge throughout every stop I had, right? Like you could have a great product, you could be solving a cool pain point, a really painful pain point, but there's this extra kind of energy and effort that you need to put in, especially with lawyers and the legal profession, about adopting the actual product, right? Not just trying it once, but actually adopting it. And I think what I learned from Envoy Global was methods and techniques that work to get lawyers and legal professionals to adopt technology, because it's a challenge, right? And so, it's just another learning experience that I have taken in my journey, because to me, that was kind of a missing piece through a lot of things, right? Was product adoption, which is a huge, I think, topic for a lot of legal tech firms, especially in the immigration space.
Would you say that sort of connects to the idea of change management within the prospective client?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think change management is directly related to product adoption. I think if you're trying to have lawyers adopt a product, you have to have certain things in mind, right? Like what are their goals? What are their pain points? Do you meet them at their pain point? Because if they have to go to another software, or they have to do several other clicks to find your solution or the magic moment that you're trying to push on them, it's going to be tough, right? So
Yeah, because I think one of the things that I've run into as well, and I've done a few presentations on change management because of this, is this concept that you talk to people and they're like, look, love the product, love the idea. I can theoretically understand how this will help me in my practice, but reasons XYZ are the things that are holding me back. And it's typically not anything that's insurmountable. It's just sort of in their minds. Like they don't have a clear vision of how they can adopt the product. They're worried about maybe pushback from employees sometimes. I mean, there's a variety of things that we don't think about. On the product side, you think, oh, I'll build something wonderful and people will see how great it is and they're going to run towards it. And the reality is that is not always the case. So yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's probably also, from a sales perspective, really good training there.
mm-hmm.
So you've had this amazing experience. I mean, you've gone from immigration lawyer to working at INSZoom, getting your feet wet in terms of product management, learning a ton about empathy and learning, and like understanding the client's journey and their actual pain points outside of immigration, going back into immigration, learning about strategy and high level decisions and adoption. And then you leave immigration again before you start your own business, right?
Mm-hmm.
You work at MetLife and you go to a large, very large corporation. I'm sure really awesome. Not to dive into your time at MetLife, but at what point did you you've gone through all these things, you've gone in and out of the immigration space, you have a ton of experience and knowledge. At what point did you start to think to yourself, you know what? I'm kind of done jumping around. I think I have the vision of what I want to build.
Yeah. I think part of that came when I got connected with my co-founder, Sujith. It was mid last year, around that time, and we connected on LinkedIn, and he had some ideas around immigration tech, right? And I was kind of an advisor at the time, and we started talking. We both had very similar interests around how Gen AI and AI can help immigration and legal tech. And I think that's one missing piece, Roman, that did not exist throughout my career. Like it's a recent phenomenon, is AI. I think AI and Gen AI has changed everything, so that a small team and small nimble team can actually build some really cool stuff, right? And I think with the onset of this technology, and the enthusiasm that I was getting from the co-founder, from Sujith, I was just like, hey, let's do this. Let's just try. There's so many opportunities here that we can do to help the legal industry. Let's do it. And I think the first thing that we tried to do actually was somewhat more along the lines of like kind of like a Legalpad per se, but using AI, right? So like doing O1 visas using AI. It was actually pretty good. Like we've never had didn't get any denials. It was like approval. So it was going good. But during that time, we were talking to the attorneys that we were working with, and this one pain point kept coming up every meeting. Right? They're like, "Hey, Carl, seriously, like, sorry, we're backed up on emails, right? Like, oh my God, I came back and I have like 100 unread emails." And when we were listening to this, we were kind of thinking to ourselves, actually, that's the real pain point here. It seems like a pretty painful problem that we're hearing. So it's one of those classic product stories where we're thinking about going down one path to build a product, but based on customer empathy, interviews, research, we found out that there was actually a much bigger problem that has not been solved. And it kind of surprised us as well, right? Like we did not go into this adventure, this journey, thinking that we would fix email for the legal industry. That was not something that we put on our whiteboard. It was something that came out from really honest interviews from lawyers and legal professionals. And it was only then that we really said to ourselves, hey, this is a big problem. Is there anything out there that's helping these? Not really. What are we waiting for? Let's jump on this and get this fixed, because there's just a really big problem out there that needs to be solved.
Was that tough to do? Because you had already built something, you were handling O1 cases. But by the way, what was the name of the company when you first started?
So yeah, the name of the company previously was Nava AI.
Mm-hmm. And so that was running. I mean, you had clients and everything, and so you effectively had to kind of shut it down, right?
Yeah. It's still partially up, but yeah, you're right. Like in terms of our energy,
refocus,
we have pivoted right to this problem to solve. Yep. And was it hard? Yeah, it was hard, but it was a difficult decision to make. But at the end of the day, it was a pretty easy. Like it was pretty stark, right? Like this problem is out. It's there. This client communication, client email problem is so pronounced, and everybody that we're talking to seems to be mentioning it. And back, in my previous product days, one of the things that I would try to do when talking to users was to validate a problem, right? Like, hey, is this problem big enough? Is this problem painful? Because we all have different problems throughout our day, but some problems we deal with, and it's not painful enough. Like I'm not willing to pay money to fix that problem. It's okay.
Right.
But when it came to this email overload, there was not really, I didn't have to validate the problem. It just was mentioned to us during calls. Hey, I would get on a call, hey, how much did you have any? And they would stop me, Roman. They were like, hey, listen, you don't have to give me the statistics. Like I could look at my inbox right now and there's 100 unread, messages that I need to respond to. So the problem essentially was surfacing itself to us, and it was validating itself.
So now's a great time to ask you, what is Candle? What does it do?
Yeah, so Candle is a legal tech company, and we essentially solve the email overload problem, and we integrate with your current systems, law firms' current systems, like their email platform, their case management system, their knowledge base, their legal reference materials. We integrate those to those systems, and we surface them. We surface relevant information right on your inbox in order for you to answer email questions, client questions on email, right? So a big problem that people have with email is context switching. They get an email from a client, and the client asks about, hey, can I travel to Mexico? What's my status? If I get a question like that, I have to go to several places. I have to go to my case management system to look up the client status. I have to look up some legal references to make sure I'm on top of travel regulations. I probably need to look up my internal law firm documentation to see if there's any templates. Candle brings all that right into your inbox screen. It brings all the relevant information about that client, about that case, about any legal references that you usually use to answer a client email, right on your inbox, on the right panel. So you don't have to go to any other tabs. You don't have to do 17 clicks in a case management system, and it brings everything there. So you're focused, and it removes all the context switching.
Is it sort of like a extension on your browser, or is it like an app? I mean, how does it? I'm trying to think visually.
Yep.
How does it work for a user? If I'm a law firm and I say, "Great, this is awesome. I'm so backed up on email." What would I expect? What could I expect?
It's an extension. extension right now. We're also building an Outlook add-in as well. It's not so basically it sits on top of their existing systems, which is by design, because this goes towards like the adoption points, right? Lawyers don't need another area. They don't need really another tool. I mean, they got so many tools. So why not just have it sit right on top of their Outlook, sit right on top of their Gmail? And it automatically brings all the information right in front of them, right at the point of frustration, right at the point of that email.
I love the idea of context switching. And also, it's funny because when we logged in to go live on this episode, I was answering an email with like 7 questions about laborless. And so I did have to go to different places and sort of look it up. And so I do think this is, of course, this is huge for immigration lawyers, right? Because like you said, as a client, especially now, especially in today's climate, this is what, April 2025, right? For anyone who's listening in the future. And right now people are incredibly stressed and nervous about, what the Trump administration is, continuing to do in terms of, going after potential individuals that are and deporting people and all that, and folks are just freaking out. Even if they have no reason to, they hear things on the news, and so their instinct is to say, I'm going to email my lawyer just to make sure I'm okay. Can I travel? Can I travel now? Can I travel in a year? How should I plan for this? And to your point, there's going to be a million different questions and a billion different places to look. Are you seeing a lot of interest or adoption, especially right now, in the current climate amongst, let's say, immigration lawyers?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And things change every day, right? So, and not only that, clients, I think the expectation is higher in terms of a response. They expect a fast response,
right,
when the stakes are so high. So and the stakes are really high right now, right? Like there are policy changes happening almost daily. They affect people's lives and families. If they send a question to a lawyer that affects, their family, and it's maybe related to one of these policy changes, they expect a quick answer. And I think anything that could help a lawyer with client responsiveness during these days, during these times, I think should, is important to have. So yes, particularly with immigration law firms right now, there's interest.
What kind of benefits are you hearing folks, report back to you? Because I can imagine definitely speed in replying. Is it easier for them to, to gather the information they need? Do they have to double check? You know what I mean? Because I can also imagine, I'm just playing devil's advocate here for the sake of the conversation, right? But I think it's important. I'd also want to say, okay, well, is this pulling from, is it missing anything? Is there, so how do you kind of go through some of the concerns that maybe lawyers might have where, well, what if Candle misses a source and it's giving me, it's surfacing some things that I can pull from, but then it's missing other things? Like, how do you deal with that kind of feedback?
It's interesting because this actually is an argument for us to, because we integrate with case management systems as one of our value adds. And we actually have seen that people that use Candle tend to adopt their current case management systems more when they're using Candle, because they know that what we pull, we're pulling from the case management system, there might be fields that they haven't used in DocketWise or Clio or whatever FileMine before, and this tool actually will help them use their case management system more and more extensively. So there's kind of like this complementary aspect in terms of using Candle and making sure their sources of truth, like their case management system, their internal records, are up to date as much as possible, right? So I think that's one. I think another thing is the sources that they give us to pull from we pull real time. So we would pull real time. So the executive orders that change like daily, certain things on, certain things on legal references. If something changes immediately, we will be able to pull that new information onto their inbox if it's related to answering that email question that they have. So, but I think the overarching thing here is that AI is not a magic wand. So it's important to know that there's still going to be a human in the loop, as they say, right, in all of this. So it's like it is still incumbent on the lawyer at the end of the day, or the paralegal or legal assistant, to see, just like with anything, hey, is this up to date? Is this the updated template that we should be using? Is this the updated, expiration date that I put into DocketWise, right? So it's still incumbent on them as well. So I think it's also related to, go ahead, Ram.
I was going to say it actually could promote good behavior from the perspective of like making sure your data is complete, making sure it's accurate, up to date, etc.
Yep. Yeah, because one of the things we also do, our tool also does, is it could automatically draft email responses, right? So not only can we pull relevant data right on your email screen, but we could also generate a response, and that generated response is based off of all the information that we're integrated with, right? So that generated response is something, it's like a first draft, right? It's something that we could draft real quickly in seconds, but the lawyer, paralegal, legal assistant would still have the ability to edit it, edit portions of it before sending it out. Or if it looks good, they just send it out, and boom, it's like you're done with the email and you move on. So there is we still want to have that human in the loop, of course, in this tool.
Yeah, and I think that's going to continue to be the case. I mean, especially when you're answering substantive questions about a client's case. I mean, if they're asking you, hey, can I travel? You're going to double check to make sure that that's there. But to your point, I mean, AI, we say this over and over again, but AI is not replacing anybody. It's just another tool that makes certain things that took longer take less time. I mean, that's really what it is. It's a calculator, right? I mean, instead of using old school addition and subtraction, you use a calculator. It's the same concept in a sense. So yeah, that's really awesome. And I think, it's interesting because on the one hand you hear, oh, email, and you think, okay, really, that's a business? And then you start digging into it and you're like, oh my God, yeah, email is 60% of my day. And actually the tools that I use, they make other things faster, but email is still there as 60% of my day. And so why isn't there a tool for that? So I love this. I mentioned this to you earlier too, but I love products that solve, yes, it's great to automate workflows and sort of, forms and all that stuff. That's almost foundational, but I love products that solve a very specific problem, because I think it's just easy for potential users to visualize what adding that product to their workflow could mean, and so the idea that you can just say, hey, this will just show up on your browser as you're answering an email. It'll pop up and it'll show you potential answers or the data that you may need to draft an answer right there, and you don't have to switch tabs or open up a new app or whatever. I think that's I love the concept. So a question for you though, as you kind of are moving forward, where do you think the growth is, right? Because I again, coming from somebody who's built a platform that solves a specific problem, from time to time we have people say, okay, that's cute, what's next? And I'm not saying that for you. I don't love that perspective, because I think, listen, this is a huge problem that we're solving, and there's so much more to be done just for this. We're not even necessarily thinking about, okay, how can we, be the next Microsoft or whatnot. What are you guys thinking? I mean, you recently launched, you're seeing a lot of adoption, you're solving such a major problem. What are you working on? What are you seeing as sort of the development arc of Kendall?
Yeah, I think maybe you could look at it from both horizontally and vertically here. So horizontal growth is right now we're focused on immigration law firms, right? Because I'm from there. I have that background. but we are certainly getting interest in other practice areas as well. Because at the end of the day, this is not this the email problem is not isolated to immigration firms. Okay, family law, personal injury law, also like plaintiff class action. I mean, if you talk about law firms that get a lot of email, plaintiff class action, my God, like that's it, like those class action firms, they are inundated with email, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think one cool thing about this product is that it's practice agnostic. It could horizontally we could expand to other practice areas. I think that's number one. Number two, if you look at it from like a vertical standpoint here, because we're integrated with these systems, right? And we're able to pull the relevant information right on the inbox, we would have a capability to allow the users to search for those data points and for those fields. So it's like a logical step to give customers the ability to have like a universal search using natural language, right? Like, hey, what's that document that I wrote that RFE response like? And it will pull that, series of documents or that document based on that natural language search, right? So I think there's a lot of capability around, search, especially for bigger firms that we've been hearing, Roman, like, maybe more like your white shoe, Am Law 100 firms, where there's just massive amounts of data,
right?
And the ability to actually, zone in into one particular document is a little bit difficult. But with this, with our integrations with all their systems, it allows us to be able to surface that from like a search capability.
Yeah, that seems so. Instead of like having it tell you or surface the documents on its own, you might have a query. Maybe it's not. Maybe you're trying to answer something. Yeah, because now I'm thinking, okay, what if I'm answering questions, but then I want to add additional information to the email on top of the direct answer to the question? How would I do that? So I guess this would make it even easier for me to say, okay, let me look up this additional thing to add to my response that, wasn't automatically generated by Candle, but, now I could use Candle to find that data and not have to context switch.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, it's fascinating, right? You think about, okay, email, what can you do with email? And then you start digging into it just like everything else. And it turns out there's so much.
Yeah. You'll be surprised. Basically, a lot of people use email as their case management system in a way. There's still a vast amount of law firms in the country that don't have any case management at all. They still use, old school, whatever, right? Excel. And basically a lot of the information lives in their email. And we don't even have to, like, a law firm that doesn't even have a case management system can still use our product. And then their flow could be optimized because we can help them pull information from their,
I love that,
on their threads right there.
So the conversation's like, hey, it's not, hey, you've got an old school process, you should update. It's like, hey, you've got an old school process, great, keep it. Here's a tool that makes your old school email only practice way better and smarter and more optimized. That's kind of genius, because those folks, I mean, I don't know who they are, but let's just assume that a good number of them have been practicing for a while. They don't want to switch. Maybe they're retiring in the next 3 to 5 years, or just they're genuinely happy with their system. It's, and they have a system and they're solo. And, I mean, you can go to them and say, awesome, we're not making you change anything. We're just giving you a tool to lean even more into your email only practice, which is kind of brilliant. You never really hear that, in the tech space. So I love that. Before we go, I guess I did have a question, because I want to talk about this with you. I didn't get a chance. You did improv for a number of years in Chicago, which is like one of the birthplaces of improv, with Improv Olympics and Second City. I did improv for a long time in New York. I love improv. I think it's not only fun, but I think it's incredible in terms of skills building. I did a virtual digital marketing conference for immigration lawyers for a few years, just online, right? But it was just something that I wanted to bring to the industry. And one of the opening session, the keynote session, if you will, on day 2 every year was a virtual improv class. I just have always wanted to bring it to the, to every circle I'm in. I'm curious from your perspective, and we're not going to nerd out about improv shows and stuff, but, having done it, taken classes, etc., what do you think, what benefits has it brought to you now, especially as a business owner or founder, from whether it's sales, whether it's creativity, whether it's, whatever.
Yeah. I think two main things stick out. One, I think it allowed me to think better on my feet. Just think a response quickly. I think improv teaches folks to do that well. And that's helped a lot throughout my career and in the startup. And I think number 2, it also teaches you to accept things the way they are, right? And not fight it. This concept about yes and, which I'm sure like just, if a cast member says something, right, go with it, right? And then and see where it goes, and don't fight it.
Right.
So I think those 2 concepts, thinking on your feet and kind of accepting things as they come, was directly related from my time at improv at Second City.
Because the first one almost makes sense. Okay, great. You're answering questions. Maybe you're on a sales call and you can, really quickly come up with something great. Can you give an example of that second point of like you're accepting information? It's especially hard when you have to go with something that you either weren't expecting or worse, that you disagree with, right? But you don't want to fight it. You kind of want to go with it. You yes and it. Can you give an example? I mean, if you can think of one where that actually has transpired in a professional setting and, you had to go with something that you weren't necessarily comfortable or expecting, but you went with it.
Yeah, I think I think this has come up in various circumstances. One is feature requests from customers, right? Like sometimes I was like, but then it kind of puts you back, and it's like, okay, there's a reason why this customer and this customer and this customer is saying this. Let's see how we can actually build this in and put it into the product, right? So I got that from customers, but also like advisors, maybe investors that say certain, like, hey, look at this, and sometimes at the moment I might be like, I don't know if that's best for our company. But when you do a little bit more research and you kind of still accept their advice, it does make sense. Because your kind of immediate instinct when you hear, bad news from somebody that you kind of trust, it's like, wait, what? No, it's not. But I think improv kind of helped me kind of like, okay, all right, let's see what we could do with that advice and see what we could do in terms of an opportunity here.
I love that. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's one of those, because if they say something that you were already thinking and they're basically reinforcing, that's super easy to yes and, right? But if they say something that, again, to your point, you disagree with, you aren't expecting, it's bad news, maybe it's feedback that is kind of negative and makes you, to be able to sort of calmly just go with it and take it and say the right thing is huge. Or sometimes even to take a beat, take a pause. Before responding and like allow yourself that sort of, for me, that was one of the big things, like comfort with silence on stage. I realize how powerful silence is on an improv stage, because especially when you don't know what the next line is going to be, you're making the whole show up right as you go. And the audience knows that every year you're along for the ride, and you say something or something happens and you just stand on stage and just let whatever the moment is sink in. And I think when you're first starting with improv, it's super scary to do that. You'll notice, like, if you ever go see like a level 1 show, they're talking so much, talking. They're trying to fill up the air. And then eventually you realize that silence is really powerful. Miles Davis, actually, the famous jazz musician, his silences were, as important to his music as his notes, right? And so I think that taught me a lot about, this work as well. Because when you get feedback from a client, or when you get like product request, a feature request, and you're like, this is dumb. Sorry. In your mind, you're like, this is dumb. And then you don't say anything, right? You just sort of let it sit. You let it marinate. So love that. Yeah, I'm sure we could do a whole hour about improv. The power of it. And I wish you went to the AILA show conference last year, the annual conference in Chicago, because number one, it was in Chicago. Number two, we had an improv show. It was like 200 plus people at IO Improv Olympics. So next time.
Will you have one in Denver this year?
There will be a stand-up comedy show. Will not be improv, but there will be a stand-up show. So if you are in Denver, if anyone here is watching or listening live, and you're going to the AILA annual conference in Denver this year, message me on LinkedIn. I will be releasing information on how to get tickets for the stand-up comedy show. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be sold out, so get your tickets ASAP. But that's a different conversation. That's not what this episode's about. Carl, this was awesome. Thank you so much, man. I love your story. I just, I'm really excited to see another company building something that's specifically solving a specific problem. And with AI, right, in a very unique way. And I think there's going to be a lot of success with what you're doing. So, appreciate you being here, and, looking forward to following you and Candle as you guys grow.
Thanks, Roman. Thanks for the time. Enjoyed it. It was great. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Yeah. What a great episode. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. I do want to say thank you once again, very quickly. Well, actually, we got a comment here. I didn't know we had a couple of comments here. We had somebody from LinkedIn. I can't tell who this user is just because of their privacy settings, but they said change management and tech adoption are their favorite topics. So thank you. And we had Arun agree with me that this whole concept is genius. So thank you, Arun, for your comment, about how brilliant this whole product idea is with Candle. So thank you. Huge thank you to DocketWise, once again, the main sponsor of this episode. I'll share briefly again, but DocketWise, in case you don't know, they're an all-in-one immigration case management system. They provide immigration forms and questionnaires in a ton of different languages. So if you have clients who speak obviously something other than English, you can work with them in their languages. They integrate with a ton of different products. And they provide great customer service and also a lot of resources for the immigration law industry, which is just really appreciated and great. Lawyers who are, let's say, a solo practitioner who wants to expand, DocketWise has blogs on what to do if you're trying to grow your practice. If you want to pivot from family-based to employment-based, they have great material on that too. So check out DocketWise. The link to their website is in the show notes, or visit them at docketwise.com. And if you talk to them, tell them you heard about them from the GMI Rocket Show. So thanks, everybody, so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I won't be an episode next week, a live one, but after that, we've got an amazing episode that I'm super excited about the following week. So in the meantime, hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Stay safe out there, and peace out.